Hi, I'm John Nerrill, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hello, my friends. I have an important conversation for you today, and one which you or someone you love will be directly impacted or affected by it. Today, we're going to talk about menopause. Now, I am not equipped to lead this conversation, but my guest is. And you might be thinking why we're talking about menopause on a career-focused podcast. Well, the answer is simple. Most of my listeners happen to be women, and the men who listen to this podcast care very deeply about them. Make no mistake, this conversation is for everyone. Now, as we move into our 40s and 50s, there are career impacts for women going through menopause. And after talking with my guest in a previous conversation, she is the right person to help me bring this conversation forward. Julia Kinslow is the founder and career strategist at Get Gritty Coaching and Consultant. She is an ICF certified professional coach whose life purpose is to help mid-career women wake up to their most compelling selves. Julia uses a fusion approach to coaching that enables women to consciously design a career path that is in alignment with their core values. Her view is that all women are compelling, but often sacrifice their own needs in a culture of caring for others. Clients working with Julia rediscover who they are as individuals, what they stand for, and the best ways to invite purpose and fulfillment into their professional and personal lives. She has more than 30 years of corporate consulting experience in Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies, as well as small to mid-sized businesses. Julia's areas of expertise include executive career coaching, organizational change management, leadership training and development, communications, and marketing. And she is currently working on a book to further explore the effects of menopause for women in the workplace. Julia, welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me today, and congratulations on your book.
Oh, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to yours as well. And just so our listeners get a little bit of background, Julia and I connected through a mutual colleague, and we had a conversation. And in the scope of the conversation, we got talking about how menopause impacts women in the workplace and why it's an important conversation for men to be more aware of it as well. And she very simply just asked me, would you want to talk about this on your podcast? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So that's some of the nice things that happened, Julia. And I'm so glad that you're here with us today. All right. I ask all of my guests this question because we want to get to know a little bit about you and your career walk. Julia, what did you want to be growing up?
I have given this some thought, knowing you do that, John. So I grew up in a family of 8 brothers and sisters. So the dynamics of having so many people in a small space really helped me learn 2 things, important things in life, how to get along with all types of personalities. And I really had this basic need to understand what makes people do what they do. So still working on that one. But I also had a lot of curiosity. Everything was why, why this, why that. And it was really tough to get answers to my questions because there was no Google then. So really understanding that in my family, being of service to others is really critical, part of our value. I knew I had to get creative to find a profession that would incorporate my curiosity and need to know things as well as, make a living. So combining what I'm good at, what the world needs, what I'm passionate for, and what will pay the bills is something I really looked for. I turned to psychology in college to really get that foundation understanding of human nature in all types of forms, from the worst to the simplest form of psychosis. So it really helped me kind of understand that. But going the PhD route at the time, I started a family. So finances obviously are critical. So you also, having children, you have to decide, do I want to spend 8 years in a program, miss their growing up, or do I want to, really kind of figure out what I can do with the experience I have? So what I ended up doing, as you mentioned, in corporate life and small business life, I just started putting together training, leadership development, change management, all the types of experience to try to become an influencer and become someone that people could come to and talk to. And I was doing it so naturally, I decided, why not get paid for this, right? And when I got to be in my mid-career, my early 50s actually, I started thinking there's got to be more than just coming to work every day and doing something for other people, at least for leaders, writing for leaders and things like that. So coaching was something I was able to, I had the opportunity to move into. It was great. And I wanted to share with you something that really describes, I wish I would have written it myself, but it was from Angela Hahn. And the way she described coaching was so beautiful. What she said was, to me, it's about seeing what we need to see to remember who we are. It is a bit less intimidating than therapy, a bit more structured than a chat with friends. It is a place where we get to hold space for remembering who we are in ways that no one else has done for us before. It is life-changing. Coaching changes the world. This is why I do it. And that to me explains it all, why I'm doing what I do. Yes.
Such a great, I hadn't heard that quote before, but it really does sum up a lot about what we get to do, because as I often describe it as well, we get to take people from a functioning state and help them move to an optimal state. And really in that place where they get to thrive. And as coaches, we hold the space for our clients so they can explore and inquire and ultimately take some action by the decisions they make that they believe are best for them. It's to me, it's one of the most rewarding parts about the work I get to do, especially when we see clients be successful and thrive. And as you and I've talked a little bit before the podcast, though, the people who typically listen are those mid-career professionals, mid-30s to mid-40s. Obviously, some are a little younger, some are a little bit older, but it is a very transitional time for them, both in their lives and in their careers. And one of the common themes amongst all of my listeners and my clients as well is that they just don't want to be stuck. They're not willing to settle. And they deal with a lot of things that happen in their lives. So they're taking care of their kids, they're raising their families. Some are taking care of elderly parents who need their care. And then we throw in a life event. And here's where I want you to start norming the conversation for us. In your definition, what is menopause?
Okay. John, it's so wonderful that you are willing to take on this subject. I know that a huge percentage of your clients are women, which is why, it is wonderful that you are willing to talk about this. So really menopause, is a transitionary stage and an evolutionary stage that isn't talked about a lot. Even women don't talk about it. What it involves is three components. There's perimenopause, which starts around 45 sometimes earlier, but around that time. Then there's menopause itself, when the period has stopped for 12 months. So women are no longer able to reproduce after that point, after the 12-month period. And then there's postmenopause, which is up to 1/3 to 1/2 of women's life. The rest of their life is in postmenopause. So it's really fascinating, all the psychological, the social, the emotional, and physical changes that women are going through. What would really help is for society, for the medical community, which is now starting to get up to speed a little more so now that women have gotten involved, in the medical community, and women, for them to understand what's happening, because that, as well as workplaces, because that is what would help so much. So some of the physical experience, some of the things that women are experiencing during this menopausal time, John, is really hot flashes, where women are just sitting there and all of a sudden, any type of emotion or anything will cause heat to your blood pressure, everything just rises to an unbearable degree, and you need to take off things, right, to feel more comfortable. You could have heart palpitations, irregular periods, very, very heavy night sweats, allergies. Who knew, right? Insomnia. Yeah, me either. Yeah. Insomnia, panic attacks, headaches or migraines, reduced libido, weight gain, mood changes. And this could be going back and forth between anxiety, depression, anger, mood shifts, joint stiffness, memory problems, which is what a lot of people call brain fog, and urinary incontinence. So you can imagine trying to do your job every day and all these things are happening. And that's just the physical side. So postmenopause, again, is when you've had that last period after that 12-month period of menopause begins the postmenopausal period. And that is when the estrogen has now pretty much declined to a point where women really need to focus on this part of their lives after they've gone through these changes, because this has, this period can bring on, if you don't take care of yourself, heart disease, stroke, brittle bones, or osteoporosis. So it's very important that women look at their diet, their situation, manage stress, and get exercise to stay healthy the rest of their lives. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you for that definition, because there was certainly a lot of things in that I wasn't aware of and just didn't know. There's a point in this where here we are in 2021, would love to think that we are far more advanced and far more knowledgeable. And in some cases that's true. And in some cases, I don't think that's true. I think there's still a lot of work that we all need to do around this and many other topics. But there's been an evolutionary progression, or maybe it's help me out with the right word here, if it's viewpoint or attitude or belief. But, there were times, if I'm correct, that menopause wasn't always talked about as openly, or it was very secret or maybe negatively viewed in society. Can you talk to us a little bit more about those kind of things and how, why that came to be?
Yeah, it does seem to be universal around the world, but in Western societies in particular, menopause sometimes could be treated as a joke, sort of like people would joke about, oh, she must be on her period or PMS time, so therefore she's acting irrational. So it sometimes has been something that just women had to deal with. And the medical community historically have always studied conditions for men. And as I mentioned, it's more recently changing, but there's just not a lot known about it. And a lot of times, since women didn't know if the things that were available medically to them were safe, they didn't know the facts, so they couldn't talk with each other. And therefore, it wasn't being talked about in the workplace. So as you mentioned, a girl's period, puberty really is where the menstrual cycle starts, and the ability to reproduce really marks a relevance in society. Mm-hmm. And menopause is often looked at as, at the end is really ending that relevance, because it's kind of considered a biological flaw. She is no longer able to reproduce to keep the species continuing. So this is made worse by the fact that males oftentimes they are able to produce sperm into old age, so they don't understand the difference because they're not experiencing it themselves. So I think what you mentioned, John, about being menopause being a really significant evolutionary change, I think if women understand that, and men as well understand that, they can sort of, like we did in change management for big IT implementations, once people understand the change and how it affects them, they're more willing to adopt it. So I think being able to apply what you learn in business, apply to yourself as well. So I think that's the significant portion of why we have not advanced that far, and it's really not being trained or leaders. I checked with some of my colleagues that were leaders and even in HR to really see if it's being talked about. And even on the SHRM site, which is the Society for Human Resource Management site, the main one they go to, HR goes to, I was only able to find a one-pager on menopause and really no offerings of training, specifically helping leaders understand, for the women that lead women and for the men who lead women, to help them understand what's going on that causes these women to feel like they're changing, they lose their confidence. Most of the women I coach these are women that were on top of their game and still are, but they come to me saying that they don't feel the same. They don't feel confident. And so these psychological changes are really having an impact on them at work and in their life. And if they understood those things, I feel like they would see it much better than maybe how it's being viewed now.
Why is it important for mid-career women to understand the physical, mental, and emotional complexities of menopause?
I think part of it is what I mentioned about the confidence level. I think when women lose confidence in what they've always been able to do, some women describe it as losing their edge. They don't know, like at 45, a lot of people don't realize that these changes are occurring. And they're always a little surprised when I say, and they come to me and they kind of tell me they just don't feel like what they're doing is really, is this what I'm going to be doing forever? It used to be satisfying. Now it's not. So I think, to go back to your question, is for women to understand the psychosocial and emotional aspects of menopause, having people talk to each other, other menopausal women, as well as, if they're comfortable, talking to managers about accommodations that can be made. I recall being in a 5-hour session meeting, and for 2 hours, all of us were in a room. We're going to keep our heads down, working on something, and nobody was allowed to leave the room for 2 hours. And you can imagine, for me, going through things, something, with women's bodies changing, with their menstruation, sometimes happening very heavily, urinary incontinence, you have a need to have facilities. And the person making the decision were young. It was a woman in her late 30s. And the look I got when I had to leave, made me feel very uncomfortable. And I felt like if she knew my situation, maybe therefore she would be more supportive. So I think it's important for women to understand these effects and how it affects them at work, so they can, kind of work with it instead of against it. And also they can get support that they need from their manager or HR or an on-site nurse or a counselor that's available to them through their associate assistance program.
For the men who are listening, Julia, and for the women who love them and want to make sure they be really good allies and everything, why do men need to be more aware about the complexities that we're talking about around menopause so they can be better allies, right? I mean, why do men need to understand this as well?
I think, not only for men that are leaders, but for men who have sisters or mothers or wives, or even daughters at some point going through the change with this critical part of their life around 45 or so. Women are going through a psychological change to really reconsider not just their jobs, but also about the time of menopause, which is about 51. Children are leaving home. Couples are becoming empty nesters. And it's really, a lot of times you'll see that women at this critical stage, men are actually, they've been their whole lives, they've been looking externally. They've been trying to build their career and building themselves up. And now at this point, they're changing to want to look more internally. Whereas the woman has been taking care of the children and the parents and everyone else and not looking at herself. So she, at this point, is at a pivot point saying, now I want to focus on me. And if the couple is looking different directions and you don't have that male support for what the woman's going through, sometimes you'll see marriages break up after the children leave home, because it is really important for men to understand what women are going through, to be supportive. It's not a joke. It's a very critical part of her life. And the most love you can have is from a supportive man helping you through these changes, growing with you and changing with you.
Thank you for that. As I was preparing for our conversation today, pardon me, I couldn't help but think how different this conversation is in light of the last 18 months. Because for many people who have had the opportunity to work remotely, they're not in the office. They're not sitting in the conference room. They're not having a one-on-one with somebody in their office. They're sitting at home like most of us, some of us, I don't know most of us, but a lot of us have been doing for the past 18 months. And we're confined to our screen and our box. And I can't help but wonder if how that's impacted. I'm curious to hear from you. Like, in your opinion, how do you think this pandemic has impacted the conversation, the awareness, the understanding and the empathy about menopause in the workplace, when for a lot of us, we're just working from home and not really being exposed to that?
Yeah, I think it solved one of the bigger issues that women have in the workplace, which is really accommodations of comfort. So in your home, you can, the temperature changes from hot flashes are really challenging for women. So women maybe could turn off their camera now instead of, peeling off all their clothing to get more comfortable, because it lasts about 7 to 10 minutes. So it's you're sweating. It's, you don't want people necessarily looking at you saying what's wrong, it's a little uncomfortable. So women can turn off their camera, or they can keep their, temperature of their homes more comfortable. Also, they have, they're closer to a bathroom, so they're able to take care of some of the things that cause distress before, when you're in meetings and you're running down the hall to get to the restroom in time for some of the uncomfortable symptoms of menopause, which can be a rush of menstruation. So very uncomfortable in a presentation, and all of a sudden your body decides to just, let loose. And, what happened in high school or middle school could happen again, so very, I think having that remote option, being able to work remotely, being able to have this hybrid model, John, actually, I think is helping women a lot, because they can choose if a manager will support them and not coming in on some days where they have migraines, or, they're really not feeling well, or they're having extreme brain fog, and maybe they can work more and be more productive at home. Those things really are kind of a blessing. If there is a silver lining, right, to the pandemic, those are sort of a blessing for, I'd say, women. There are a lot of people going back to work. So, a lot of the people I know are going back now. That could change again, right? But, so I think down the road, even with a hybrid model, I think helping leaders understand what to expect, so they can provide the support, for women to talk about. Because what happens is, the one thing we didn't talk about, John, is the impact to companies, and why companies should care about this is because a lot of times, if women have such extreme symptoms, they're leaving the workforce. So they're taking all that great talent and experience with them. And I think I read a statistic for a manufacturing company where a lot of times the baby boomers are now retiring, and it's sort of a brain drain, taking, 20, 30 years experience with them. They're not having the time to train the younger generations. So that knowledge transfer is costing about $3,000 per person of loss. And it also helps our GDP to support women. Women, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but they make up about 55% of the workforce, but have about 29% in executive roles. And if you think about 45 and 55, this is the critical time for career women to really move up. I mean, they have spent their 30s and early 40s just pushing hard to get to this level. And then all of a sudden their confidence drops, their productivity and their energy drops, and they don't know why. They just feel bad about themselves. So I feel like having this knowledge, not only for the companies and for HR, for women to go and seek accommodations, if not from their manager, then from their HR department, from their nurse, from their counselor on site, if possible.
It's an interesting point and a much needed one in terms of how leaders can be more supportive or more aware of women who are going through menopause. And as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about if I were in such a role, and of course being a guy, there is a little fear about bringing up the conversation. In fact, I probably wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole in some ways because I'm like, I don't want to offend. I don't want to upset. I don't want to assume, but I still want to be that caring and supportive leader and at least work at building the trust in the relationship and having the space that if I did have a female employee who wanted to come and share that they may feel comfortable. So here's the question. In your experience, and as you're helping leaders and executives and companies that you're working with, what are some simple things that leaders can do to be more aware, be more open, be more knowledgeable to handle these kinds of conversations or situations and to do them professionally and gracefully, even though they might be a little quote unquote awkward?
Yes. So there's a lot to unpack here. So I'll try to get through some of, I really feel like some of it is on the woman herself, because that would be a very uncomfortable thing as a male. And women also feel like sometimes there is ageism and sexism involved in these conversations. So training the leaders and then training colleagues and everyone, sort of like sexual harassment training. Think about that. It used to be a problem. Well, sometimes still is, right? But it is less of a fact. When I talk, I talk about my experiences and I talk to the younger folks, they can't even believe some of the things women went through, and are going through. But with training, provided you take the training,
That's an important point. Yes.
Yes, complete the training. If you do that effectively and you make it a requirement, then everyone is sort of in equal knowledge. Knowledge is power. Everyone feels more comfortable with the subject matter. And then it opens conversations for a woman experiencing that to maybe talk with her manager about it, whether it's a male or female. We as women don't always know what's going on either, especially if we haven't experienced it. So we need the same training. If you had leader training, if you had associate training, employee training, it would really help to open those conversations. And it would also help women recognize what's considered an ageist question, or what is sexist. If it's being trained in a more generic setting, I think it leads less of that uncomfortableness. And I also feel like HR departments really, we need to really help provide that training to leaders to help them. I know there are so many wonderful mentors that are, male as well, that would love, you yourself included, would love to help, and you want to know how to help. You just need someone to tell you how best to help.
Right. That's such a great point where you can you can open up that conversation to simply say, what do you need from me? How do I help you? How can I support you right now? And then the important piece here then is to listen and to see if what they're asking for, you're able to do. And usually in most cases, you probably can, but it's about being able to listen to see what is there. I thank you. I thank you for that. In our conversations leading up to this as well, one of the things that we talked about is, what happens after menopause, right? You go through menopause and you talk about menopause's afterlife. Talk to us a little bit about what women experience in terms of after menopause and how that impacts both their personal as well as their professional life as they pursue their purpose.
Yes.
Continue to pursue their purpose, I should say.
Yes. I think a lot of times menopause is, because women are going through this change for, could be 1 to 10 years, they're going through this change. So it's a big part of their life. And as I mentioned, postmenopause is everything after your last menstrual period. So it's could be a half of your life. So it's really important for women to listen to their bodies, listen to their minds. If their mind is saying, I am not satisfied with my life, is this it? Is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? And what legacy am I leaving for myself, for my family, for, society, for posterity? So these are really relevant questions that women have. And it's a very exciting time, me having gone through it. And now I'm on the other side. I want to be able to help women see that it's kind of cool being on this other side. I mean, provided you're eating right. And part of the compelling program I have is, your diet, eating a plant-based diet and things that help you feel better, your body feel better, your mind feel better. So it's really about, looking for those learning opportunities, following those paths. Some women open new businesses. Some women explore new loves that maybe they had prior to families or prior to being so caught up in the mid-career, hamster in a wheel kind of situation. They have time to focus individually on themselves. And I've seen women transform in a matter of 3 sessions, usually, where I see them come in and they just don't feel good about themselves. And I know them to be top leaders and top on their game. And after 3 sessions, and they're really focused, they do their homework, they're focused on themselves, I see a huge transformation and they get so excited for life. And I get excited for them because they are starting to see what I see. And part of it is, there's some really great reasons to love postmenopause or menopause after the changes. Give yourself a break during the changes, allow things to happen, this evolutionary process, and look forward to no longer having periods or PMS. You can have sex without worrying about getting pregnant. That's a big thing for women. And you have greater self-assurance and you really feel empowered to, take more risks with your life. And I'll say something and a woman will say, yes, that's it. That's what I want. And that purpose and fulfillment, John, is what's so critical to women and listening to that voice. Sometimes when women don't listen and they continue to suppress that feeling, they end up with health concerns, more stress, less fulfillment in life. So it's a really great time to really listen to yourself and enjoy the rest of your life because, hopefully your kids are launched, your family's in good shape. You may have an ailing parent, but you have more time for yourself and it's great time to take it.
Good to know. Well, Julia, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm glad we opened up the space for it. As we start wrapping up, what else would you like to share with the listeners around menopause, maybe that we haven't discussed yet, but you feel is important for us to have at this time right now to share with them?
I think what's important, John, is to do your research. one of the reasons I'm doing this now is because it is hard to find information in the US on menopause, especially in the workplace. And going back to my, why are things like this kind of questioning, I have to know. I feel like me and a lot of women have suffered in silence, and they're not able to share it with each other, with their managers. Women fear that they might be considered weak and not treated the same as men in the workplace, may not get career advancement. But by suffering in silence, what's happening is that we are never making progress. Women are dropping out at the height of their careers, and they're not bringing the amazing talents, the amazing experience, and not helping the business thrive in the way they could if they just had small accommodations for some of these changes. So I think what's important is for women to, share their stories, look for mitigation strategies, talk to their manager if they're comfortable, their HR department for accommodations in the workplace. Please tap into your associate assistant programs if they're available that may have an on-site nurse or a counselor available. Make sure you use it. Sometimes they'll give you 6 sessions for free, so definitely use it. Educate yourself, find out natural and medical remedies to help with some of the symptoms to help you cope with it. Stay away from caffeine and alcohol, which makes things worse. And just find time for you, whether it's a little meditative room. If the kids have moved out, take one of the bedrooms and make it your room. For men, John, that's for women. For men, I would say it is no joke. Seriously, it affects relationships, not just working relationships, but home relationships. It's really time for you to help support your life partner in this change, and provide that empathy and support for women that you love and women you lead.
Thank you. Nothing else to say, right? But just simply thank you. I appreciate you so much for having this conversation with me and bringing this to my listeners, because we know it's important, and I'm glad we could open up the space for them today. You provided such great insight and information and a lot of things, both for women and men, to think about going through this event. And so with that, it's time for my last question to you, which is, what advice would you give for anyone listening to help them build their mid-career GPS as they figure out whatever is next?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, for women, asking themselves, is this it? Listen to your gut talking to you. It's very, very important. It's critical health-wise, in all ways, literally health-wise, to listen to your gut. Try something new, continue learning, read books, discover anything through travel, open side hustles. That's kind of what I did and led to coaching. So it leads to purpose, fulfillment, and just try to envision your future for how it can be fulfilling for this last half of your life as a woman. It's so exciting. It really is great to be to this other side. So hang in there.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, Julia, I know people are going to want to connect with you, touch base with you. So please share with us, where can they find you, connect with you, and tell us what other things you have coming up.
Great. First of all, John, I want to make sure if we can include those additional resources in the notes page so that women can see some of the places where they can get more information.
Absolutely.
There's some great books out there, some old ones, some new ones, that really talk to you a lot about how you can get help. And there's also the North American Menopause Society. I put a link in there as well. So check that out. It does give you resources. So if you're a leader and you don't have training, you could check that out to maybe inform yourself. As far as connecting with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Julia Kinslow, and Facebook and Twitter at this @ Get Gritty C, as well as, and for more information on today's topic or to help you set a course for the career and life you love, visit me at getgrittycoaching.com to set up a free 30-minute consultation. I'm happy to talk through this and other issues with you.
Great. I will make sure all of your information and the resources that we have those in the show notes. Julia Kinslow, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the podcast. It was great talking to you today.
Thank you for having me, John. Again, congratulations on being a best-selling author. So excited for you.
Thank you so very much. All right, my friends. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Remember, we build our mid-career GPSs 1 mile or 1 step at a time, and how we show up matters. Make it a great rest of your day. If you enjoyed today's episode and don't want to miss another one, follow on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen, and kindly remember to rate and review. Visit johnnarroll.com to download your free job search tracker and other free mid-career GPS resources right there on my homepage so you can start building your mid-career GPS. Come join my private Facebook group at Your Mid-Career GPS and join an amazing community of people like you who are all working to figure out whatever is next for themselves and their careers. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narroll Coaching. I'll see you next time.